Hello and welcome, PPL fans. I'm your host, King L5. I have Luxanse with me, and we're going to go over the matchup of the week for week 3. So, we decided to go with Shuckleking versus Mountaih, two of the GOATs of Wi-Fi Draft League over the past few years. What do you have to say about these players?
I think this is a really interesting matchup, especially during the latter half of Gen 8. These two players were probably some of the best players the scene had. And another interesting part of this matchup, in my opinion, is that Shuckleking used to play in DPL, probably the biggest draft league team tour, I would say, in season 1 through 3 or so. And Mountaih recently started playing in it in the latest season. So it's also kind of a matchup of old versus new in terms of like the wider scene, you could say.
For sure. Now, I really liked this matchup in particular because it has some really standard builds. You know what I'm saying? You have the Tuskull Dango, which is great. You have, and then regen plus chomp, you get the hazards up and then you can stay around with the regens. You have the Volt turn, into Breaker with Breloom. Ursaring is pretty cool this gen. And then SK has a more offensive team, You got the Azu Noivern. Tigaton has a nice Gloomon. There's really nice structures on both ends.
I would have to agree. It's something that's very interesting here as well as the hazard game, because SK does have a lot of options for both setting hazards and removing hazards, but Mountaih kind of has the same with Hatterene and Scizor, being able to prevent or remove hazards, and then spikes from Garchomp, toxic spikes from Slowking. So there's a lot of interesting play going on there as well.
For sure. Now, let's just get into the more specifics of this matchup, because, we are highlighting this as the match of the week. We came with some notes prepared, So a few things that we've noticed. First off, I really enjoy Belly Drum Azu in this game. And, there's a few reasons why. Number one, it sets up for free on Alomomola. There's literally nothing that Aloe can do. Well, maybe not literally nothing, but nothing super obvious. And Aloe, funny enough, is the only reliable switch into Great Tusk. So one thing I was cooking in the lab is, what if you ran Eject Pack Tusk? Click CC into the Alomomola or Headlong Rush, doesn't matter. Then you get a free switch into Azu and you can belly drum with absolutely no risk. And then you have a +6 Azu, which is an immense threat versus Mountaih's team. All you need is a little bit of chip, which you can get up maybe some hazards, and then that's all you really need. However, Mountaih doesn't have to just be a sitting duck versus that. There's a few techs he can pull out.
One of those techs is actually Mirror Herb. So what we were talking about is if Mountaih, for example, uses Mirror Herb on Scizor and goes into that on the Azu belly drumming, then suddenly SK is in a very tough position because Bullet Punch, Thief, and Trailblaze covers SK's entire team, and at +6, that's just gonna get killed.
Yeah, it's a really dangerous reverse sweep option for Mountaih, and it's something that I really enjoy as well because let's say the Azu is just choice banded because SK doesn't think he can get a belly drum up reliably, he just wants to hit things. Well, you're not going to click Waterfall or Liquidation into Alomomola, you're clicking Play Rough. So either way, Scizor's coming in on a resisted hit, and it's not that bad, right?
Exactly.
So,
I think you had another tech that you wanted to mention as well.
Yeah, if you wanted to go for the more straight up 1v1 of the Aloe versus the Azu, you could run Skill Swap on Aloe, which is kind of goofy giving the Azu regen, but it does take away its huge power, which means that, potentially you'll be able to, shrug off some of the hits, as well as you gain huge power on your own liquidation on your Aloe, which is kind of a side thing, but it would be kind of funny. You don't instantly lose to belly drum in that situation, and you only really need it one time, because after that the citrus is used, the belly drum has gone off, he's minus 50 HP for that. You can't really repeat that process, And if you're Rocky Helmet, for example, I think you might just kill the Azu before it kills you with non-huge power +6. So that's another option. However, the thing is, Aloe also really enjoys Baton Pass in this matchup to help get his own threats in safely, so it's kind of kind of 4 move slot syndrome, even though Aloe doesn't have 4 great moves here. Like, you want little specific techs, but you can't have all of them. So
For sure. Moving on from the Azumarill though, another mon that I think has a really good offensive matchup for SK is Great Tusk. Ground move, Ice Spinner CC. Hits pretty much everything on Mountaih's team for really good damage. With Rapid Spin, for example, you could blow through this team by outspeeding everything and just being able to click buttons, with the only like real threats to that being as a Titan clicking Ice Shard, or the Alomola, which we've already established can be set up bait if not used correctly.
yeah, for sure. I really enjoy the Tusk matchup. Spin is great utility because it gets rid of hazards as well as boosts your speed, which in this case is potentially game winning. So it's like, yeah, you gotta run Rapid Spin here. It's just too good. Goldango as well. The dual stabs are kind of unresisted, so that's pretty nice. You can pack Focus Blast as well if you want, just to get a little bit more reliable damage on the Ursaring and Tyranitar. But you know, Goldango in general, you don't need Focus Blast if you wanted to fit, say, Nasty Plot Recover, really take advantage of that Aloe coming in on Azu. You know, that's something you could do. If you wanted a bulky Goldango, Recover Nasty Plot Dual Stab works really well, as you can switch in on Breloom on any move except for Bulldoze. So it gives you some defensive utility, and it's a huge offensive threat at the same time. You'd probably want to speed creep Jolly Breloom in that case. It also conveniently creeps Scizor, so you're always going to outspeed the Thief. So that's something that you could see here. It also walls Glowking pretty well, so yeah, that's one of the sets Glowking could, or not, Goldango could be.
For sure. And you already mentioned it briefly, but I think another mon, but on Mountaih's side that's really cool here is Breloom. Breloom with 4 attacks, like CC, maybe like Loaded Dice, Bullet Seed or something, Bulldoze, Rock Tomb. If he gets the predictions right, he can pretty much get a kill every single turn, practically. And even then, like, you could also substitute, like, CC and Bullet Seed for, or keep Bullet Seed even, but, like, substitute CC for Mach Punch and make it Life Orb, so you can switch up your moves as well. I think that's a really strong into SK's team.
Yeah, the thing with 4 attacks Breloom, which is a nice thing, is Rock Tomb and Bulldoze lower their speed by 1. So if you use those moves on a switch-in and you get the prediction wrong, well, they're still -1 speed and you're going to outspeed the next turn. So you still have another chance to make a prediction. Like, say you Rock Tomb on the Great Tusk. Now the Great Tusk is slower and has to fear Bullet Seed, so maybe he'll switch out. You know, it's another mind game to throw out there. However, 4 attacks does mean you're not running SD, you're not running Spore, so there's a little bit of utility missed out on there. So it'll be interesting to see if he values the 4 attack coverage, or, you know, a Spore or SD with dropping one of Rock Tomb or Bulldoze, because SK kind of has to respect both of them until he fully scouts the set. So hiding an SD in the back and giving up, say, Rock Tomb could be potentially pretty nice, since the Noivern is never really going to break through the Galarian Slowking. It's not a huge threat. So I feel like you could give up Rock Tomb if you wanted, but you might just want the 4 attacks, so...
I would have to agree. And to go back a bit on stuff we've already said, but Scizor, as we said, is a really good late game win con as well, even without the Mirror Herb. Just Sword Sand set with Bullet Punch, Thief, Trailblaze, like we mentioned before, can very easily clean up this game as well. I think that's a very important offensive piece for Mountaih.
Yeah, 100%. I also wanted to highlight the Garchomp with like a mixed set of EQ and Draco. That's all you really need to like really mess up SK's team. You know, since Great Tusk has such amazing natural physical bulk, the Draco does feel pretty easy to slap on, as well as it does to KO Unaware Quagsire, you know, since it ignores the -2 drops.
Exactly, and for the most part, everything else just drops to EQ, and the few ground resists that are there, again, they don't love taking Draco.
Yeah.
But the one that probably does take it best is Zarude, which I think is also a very important piece for Shuckleking. Dark Stab is very strong in this matchup, combined with the coverage that Zarude gets. So I think that can be somewhat of a way to mitigate the Chomp a little bit, but it's not a great way overall, I'd say.
Yeah, the Trump is nice, but Zarude revenge killing it potentially is pretty dangerous on the, you know, counterattack front. So maybe you would see something. I don't know what you'd even switch into it, to be honest. It kind of just kills everything. Darkest Lariat, or not Lariat, it doesn't get it this gen, but Crunch, Dark Stab, doesn't really have great switch-ins, since the resists all die to coverage moves, except maybe Breloom with the Mach Punch, or maybe a Scarf CC is something you could have as like a Zarude check. Other than that, it's really Scizor taking that hit, and not much else. But you really want HP on Scizor, because that's a potential win con with SD. So what I'm thinking is maybe Chomp could be Rocky Helmet, EQ Draco, and then just stay in on the Zarude, and then chip it with Rough Skin Rocky Helmet, Draco, and then maybe you'd pack Fire Blast or something, so you don't have to drop your special attack to attack it, you know? Something like that.
And even then, the Chomp can pretty freely get up hazards as well to make progress in the game, since SK's removal in Tusk can be blocked by Drifblim if Mountaih decides to bring that, and Noivern with Defog does also mean that SK is getting rid of its own hazards, which I actually think are pretty good in this matchup.
Yeah, I was gonna say Garchomp could also go for a double hazard setup, although the removal on SK's team is, I think, good enough, right? Where you can't necessarily keep them up the whole time. Plus, Zarude can pretty easily slap on heavy-duty boots and still do its job 100%. So I think that could be something that you need to watch out for.
Yeah, and we already highlighted it a little bit, but something else I think is important to mention is that Tinkaton has Mold Breaker, obviously, and can just get up the rocks reliably, even versus the Hatterene, since it will ignore the Magic Bounce. I think that's going to be pretty huge for SK here, as it might force Mountaih to run stuff like Boots Kilo or Boots to Titan, which is a lot less optimal than other items that he could have brought, potentially.
Yeah, for sure. What 6 mons do you think are coming from both sides? Because I think the top 4 on both sides are coming 100%, but after that, it's kind of hard to say.
I would
expect
agree with you.
Noivern.
Yeah, I think Noivern
Tinkaton
might be. Noivern, Tinkaton, I think both are pretty ringable this matchup. Quagsire, I think SK could bring it, but I personally feel like that might be a trap that he's working himself into, because a lot of the setup that Mountaih has can beat Quagsire, so I don't think it will efficiently be able to stop that.
Yeah.
As for the last 5, I don't love any of their given matchups a lot into Mountaih's team personally.
Yeah, Jolteon with Terra Ice could be interesting, but at the same time, Galarian Slowking is pretty comfortable versus that. Potentially, you could be Calm Mind Jolteon. It did get it that gen, trying to brute force through the Glowking, but at the same time, if you're ever gonna Terra Ice, the Glowking can always come in and chilly reception into the Scizor or the Breloom, and you die to either priority, so it's not amazing.
And another thing as well is, I'm pretty sure Kilowatt also gets Fold Absorb, right?
It does.
So,
but it is slower and dies to Terra Ice.
It is slower, but it can Terra Water. So
it can.
It then mitigates the weakness to Ice as well, and it won't get hit by the electric attacks from Jolteon either.
That would be pretty interesting, actually. I feel like Alomomola is pretty nice as the Tusk answer.
I would have to agree.
As long as you don't let Azu sweep you. You know, it is kind of setup fodder. So if it comes, it'll probably be either Baton Pass to try to get out of there versus Azu, or get a slow momentum versus Tusk. You take the hit and then you Baton Pass out into, something else. Or it'll be skill swap to take away the huge power, or he won't bring it. I think it's kind of a liability in that case. There are other mons you can bring, like maybe the Ursaring, Drifblim. They're all usable to an extent. Tyranitar is kind of tough here. All the mons kind of hit it super effective, except for Noivern.
And I have to agree.
Noivern can run Focus Blast, although it probably won't.
Yeah. I think if anything, the most bringable mons outside of Allah are probably the two Terror Captains on Mountaih side, with Kilowattrel being a very solid revenge killer into SK's team outside of Jolteon, and Titan with priority Ice Shard can do a lot against some of the mons that we were predicting SK to bring, and maybe with the Terror Water it can take Azu hits or it can take Goldengo hits better as well.
Yeah, potentially. Might just be a top 6 versus top 6. Yeah, the classic.
I could definitely see that happening, yeah. How do you feel about this matchup? Like, who would you favor in this matchup, and by how much?
It's really volatile. There's lots of threats that just don't have great answers on both sides. I'm looking at the Breloom, I'm looking at the Scizor, I'm looking at the Garchomp for Mountaih. All huge offensive threats with very limited counterplay, but at the other side, Azu, big danger. Zarude, huge danger. Great Tusk, big danger. Goldengo, huge danger. They're all great. So it's going to be potentially a quick game, I feel like.
I would have to agree, yeah. I could see this game... I could see this being a very quick game, or I could see this being a game that takes quite a while. Well, both of the players look for like the correct positioning to get their their offensive pieces in to break the other team apart, really.
Yeah, it depends on how they try to approach the matchup. If they try to approach it as like, I'm gonna win as fast as possible, they could both do that. Whereas if they want to say, oh, I'm going to try to keep his threats in check as long as possible, that's another building approach that they can do. For example, you know, a bulkier Goldengo, a Spadef AV Tusk, for example, can really sponge a lot of hits. You know, bulky Zarude with bulk up synthesis, for example, is something that they could do. Rocky Helmet Garchomp versus Life Orb, you know, these are choices in the builder that they can make. Do I want to be a bulkier Scizor with maybe Citrus Berry? Do I want to be that Mirror Herb SD3 attacks, you know?
Yeah.
Am I bringing the Aloe, or am I just going for the offensive options, you know? Overall, I feel like Shuckleking should have a small advantage in this matchup. However, if Mountaih's techs hit, for example, that Scizor set, if it does come in on Belly Drum, it's Jover. So like there's some big danger, but I think SK has a slight edge.
I would have to agree with you. I was gonna say it's like maybe 55-45 for SK, if anything. But
I was thinking that as well, but I think it's maybe closer to 60-40.
Maybe, yeah.
Regardless,
I think this is going to be a very entertaining game to watch.
I feel like Mountaih has to click the right buttons, and SK just has to click the stab button. And it has more general coverage. So if Mountaih gets all the predicts right, then it's more of a 50-50. But, you know, you can't really bet on that. I mean, as great of a player he is, SK is also no slouch, you know. He'll be trying to make the reads as well, and you can't get them all right. So, or maybe he can, you know. You have to watch the battles, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah, sometimes he can just be him. I think that's going to wrap it up, though. We've been going for almost 20 minutes.
Really?
Maybe it'll get edited down, maybe not. But either way, I think that's it. We'll see you guys for week 4.
Thank you for watching.